Yo, what's up everybody? Isaac here, coming to you with another New World video. So today's video is, well, I got another fun one for you today. It's going to be a part of my Advanced Tanking Guide series. So we are here at the Dynasty Shipyard. Currently, Dynasty is mutated and, well, we have a void mutation at the Dynasty Shipyard. So we are light tanking the Dynasty today, and we're going to show you our build. So if you have watched my previous builds and guides and that, you should know that I tend to try to stay away from this is the one and all be all build, because, well, I think there are definitely times when you are going to want to switch up your builds depending on the mutation, depending on the run you're doing, depending on your team, and all of that good stuff. So in my last video, we showed you light tanking the Lazarus. But this one's the Dynasty, and definitely, a little bit different than Lazarus. I would say the Dynasty is definitely a step up in difficulty level as far as light tanking goes in comparison to the Lazarus. So we have switched up our build slightly. Our hammer build, roughly the same. That might even be exactly the same as the one I used for Lazarus. We will cover that one quickly, but I have switched up my sword and shield build. And I actually switched it up to one of the builds I suggested that you could do if you were struggling with the build that I did show you. But that is because, well, it's going to give us a little bit more survivability and utility to help our team out and to help me survive as the tank. So when you're light tanking, well, you're kind of pushing the limits. And, well, if you go down as a tank when you have a bunch of 5-con DPS, you can get your team in trouble pretty fast. But we are running a 100-con light tank here in the Dynasty Shipyard. We are going to cover our gear and, weapons, jewelry, stats, all of that good stuff. We're going to cover our weapon mastery builds. So let's jump right into it. First things first, we're going to show you our gear. I got a pretty darn nice setup for this one. Pretty fortunate for that. And, well, I have a lot of refreshing on this build, which is really important when you can get it. So, our headpiece. This, I believe, is a name drop that you probably can farm somewhere. Don't remember off the top of my head, but easy enough anytime you want to search something. You can search it online or go to nwdb.info, newworlddatabase.info. and search up any piece of equipment and you can find if it's available to farm for you. So this is our headpiece. We have ward and refreshing, and we want to have either dexterity or strength. And the nice thing about pieces like this, once you're light tanking, this piece is going to work for you whether you're being a DPS or a tank. So kind of killing two birds with one stone there. So make sure you're finding ward. Make sure you're getting either dexterity or strength here, and anytime you can get refreshing, it's going to be a big help for you. Obviously the luck, it doesn't really do much for us here. So our chest piece, got a really good chest piece. So corrupted ward and then sturdy energy. When blocking a hit, well, below 30% stamina, gain 39% stamina regeneration for 6 seconds. Effect is removed if you become exhausted. So I really love to have this on my chest piece when possible. So I would say a BIS chest piece would be ward plus sturdy energy plus refreshing. But this is good enough. It's going to do the trick for us. But then we have our gloves, physical aversion, which is actually pretty darn nice once we are a light tank. Because, well, all of the ranged, whether it's the muskets or archers, once we are a light not a light DPS, a light tank running 100 con, well, the stuff is going to start hurting us a lot more than it does when we are a heavy tank. So actually becomes pretty nice. Like, I'm not that crazy about having physical aversion as a heavier tank, but once you're a light tank, this is actually pretty darn nice. So we have refreshing and corrupted ward. So this is a very, very strong piece. You know, up there in the range of being abyss type of piece. Once again, same piece here. Ward, refreshing, physical aversion. And then we got, once again, ward, refreshing. So we have 4 pieces of refreshing and ward, and then a 5th piece of ward and sturdy energy. So you definitely could get away with 5 pieces if you wanted to craft like this purple one here. Ward, refreshing, plus either dexterity or strength. And, well, obviously you gotta have your gem slot, and you're gonna be good to go. Our shield, well, you can get these shields, I believe, from the Dynasty, and they come locked in with ward, or not ward, they come locked in with Bane, Corrupted Bane, and Fortifying Shield Rush. Very, very good, very strong perk. These shields are, you couldn't ask for better shields as a light tank. And then the third perk, it can vary which one's going to be best for you depending on your sword. So originally I was using one that had Vicious right here, but then I realized, oh wait, I actually have Vicious on my sword, and this is a very, very, very good sword, you know, towards the lines of being a Abyss tanking sword. We have Bane, Vicious for extra damage, and refreshing move. So whenever I can, I'm looking for the 2 main things, refreshing move and Bane. And then if I can get a 3rd damage perk, awesome. Super pumped about that. And on our hammer, well, I did switch things up a little bit. And I've mentioned in a few of my other videos how it would be very acceptable to go with refreshing move and sundering shockwave. You know, ideally I'd have a 3rd damage perk. I mean, the perfect one would be Corrupted Bane plus sundering shockwave, refreshing move, but that's like near impossible drop to get or craft to get. And if you were to get a 3rd damage perk, these hammers are hammers that could be anywhere from 100k to 300k, so incredibly hard to get that perfect Abyss hammer. But why are we not so worried about having Bane? Or, you know, obviously we would love it, but at the end of the day, the hammer, it's not going to be doing damage for us. Even if we have Bane, it's still not going to do crazy amount of damage. All of the skills we are using, they do very minimal damage. They're all about utility. So you definitely can get away without having refreshing move. You could go Bane, Sundering Shockwave, or you could get away without having Sundering Shockwave, but obviously then you lose out on this nice additional Ren that's going to help your teammates do extra damage and yourself as well. But the refreshing move, it really does come in handy. It's not absolutely necessary because we do have some refreshing built into our build based on the skills tree we are taking. But, you know, after playing with this one in this dungeon, well, as a tank, a light tank, 100 con, we really are relying on having all of our knockdowns up and ready to go. So you can see none of these are extremely long cooldowns, especially since we have a bunch of refreshing on our gear. But that refreshing move is going to help bring them back even that much quicker. Sometimes that's all it takes. It's a matter of split seconds. If you have your ability up a split second sooner, well, oftentimes it can save your life and ultimately your full team's life from getting a full wipe. So absolutely necessary? No, but I find it to be really important, especially in this dungeon for this build, because yeah, once we're a 100 con light tank, we're really dependent on having these knockdowns. So what did I change up on my sword and shield? Well, I did take Shield Bash. Absolutely love this skill. I usually don't take it, but I found it to be fairly necessary and important for this run. So let's keep going with our gear a little bit more. So our jewelry, we have our void protection and health. Strength or dexterity here, so that's really all you need. A 2-perker and you're going to be fine. If you can get a 3rd perk like divine or refreshing, that would be kind of bis. Either one of those would be perfect. And our ring here, we have slash damage plus hardy plus leeching. This is near bis. You could argue different rings could be better. You could say instead of hardy, we'll take critical damage chance or something, but I find this extra stamina to be pretty important. So the leeching definitely helps as well. Sometimes it's just a matter of a few HP that we're hanging on by. So slash damage, our sword and shield is going to be our main damage dealer. Our hammer, it just doesn't do much damage. We're not depending on it for normal attacks, other than for the sake of bringing our cooldowns back since we have refreshing move. But other than that, if we're trying to do damage, 1, we have a sword and shield out because it's going to do a lot more damage because we got double bane. And 2, well, we are running leadership, so damage increased 10% from leadership passive. So this is going to increase damage for our whole team. So really important that when we can, we have our sword and shield out as much as possible to help us do more damage, to help our teammates do more damage. That's not to say that you should pull out your sword and shield and, throw away your chance at survivability because you need to have your sword and shield out. Have your hammer out whenever you need to for survivability's sake and to help your teammates survive. First things first, that's first priority. Keep yourself alive, keep your teammates alive. Second priority, have your sword and shield out to buff your damage and your teammates' damage whenever possible. So, our earring, once again, despised, refreshing toast. Those are the 2 important ones. If you can have something to help your cooldowns here, awesome. If you could have healthy toast here, then we can put a mana pot here for extra HP boost instead of our hardy meal. But this is a very good earring. Would rather refreshing here, but you can't ask for absolute everything to be bis at all times. Slowly work towards that if you can, but we cannot complain about this earring. So another little Easter egg for you guys. So I've had this 1 gold bag for a long time, but I finally got my last 2 gold bags. Finally had enough gold, and I'd love to have spent it on some other things, but I just find this perk to be too important. What is that? Lasting consumption. Well, food honing stones are going to last 16% longer. That's not necessarily going to help us from, survivability standpoint with inside the dungeon, but it's going to be nice to help us save some gold in the long run, just because, well, when we are popping expensive foods and expensive honing stones, because we are going to be popping these tier 5 honing stones every time, 7% additional damage output. If you're trying to be endgame, you have to be rocking these tier 5 honing stones. Sure, you could go with a cheaper one and lose only 2% damage, but if you're trying to be endgame, you're trying to push the limits, you need to squeeze every last percent everywhere you can. If you cheap out here, then you say, well, I can cheap out somewhere else too, and then I can cheap out somewhere else too. And before you know it, you have many percentages of damage lost. And that being said, another really important thing. You are the tank, so it's not as absolutely important, but especially as you're starting to push towards the light tank side of things and you're trying to help your team out as much as possible, you need to be getting major trophies. Absolute must. So once again, 5% extra damage, 5% extra damage, and I do have one ultimate combat trophy. Absolutely love having this one, just because I'm able to put it up and forget about it, and I'm good to go. I don't have to be switching out trophies every single week. And that's one thing I would have loved to spend my gold on instead of these bags, but these bags are more important. So, but there is one more thing to mention about these bags. I mentioned food and honing stones, and well, one thing I'm going to talk about before I move on. Occasionally, I am going to be buying expensive foods depending on my gear and my desired attributes. Well, beef broccoli, increased strength by 40 for 60 minutes. Sometimes, depending on the gear that I have, well, I might need to pop a full strength 40 strength food. And these are a little bit expensive, but it is a 60-minute. And then by the time you add up these 3 bags, I mean, you almost extend that to a full 2 hours. So, not quite, but yeah, we're getting close to that. So, it's going to make that food last a lot longer. And once we're spending lots of gold on more expensive foods. So, the reason I'm sometimes popping a strength food, well, I got tons of dexterity on my gear here. So, in order to make sure I have a decent amount of strength, I need to pop a strength food at times. So, I do have a few extra pieces with strength, but a couple of my pieces that I do have a strength piece for, they didn't have refreshing, so I went ahead and slotted the one that had ward plus refreshing. It comes in huge when we're talking hammer knockdowns, and we can get our cooldowns back just a couple seconds sooner. It means the world. It's the difference in surviving and not surviving. So really important for this build that you are working as much refreshing as you can into it. So, but yeah, anyways, before we get sidetracked again, let's talk about the last part. Ward potions last 16% longer. So, our ward potions, they are a massive part of the build and survivability. Increased damage absorption from corrupted by 15% for 30 seconds or after receiving damage 15 times. So I don't know if there's any way to absolutely confirm how well this works. Is this for sure giving us an extra 16% of time on these ward potions? I don't know, but I'm kind of assuming that it does. And the other thing, once you take damage 15 times, then it's maxed out. I'm assuming that it doesn't add on to this, but I just don't know for sure. But that is one of the other reasons why I really, really wanted the 3 gold bags, because if it's going to make my ward potions last longer, man, that definitely could be the difference in life and death in many situations. So, very important. So, that covers our armor and jewelry and an extra Easter egg. Never talk about the bags really, but this is one instance where they can help you out. Is get the gold bags, get lasting consumption when you can afford them. So, one extra thing is I am swapping out to heavy just for one part of the dungeon. So I am going to go ahead and throw this gear on. Not going to go super in depth with it because more or less it just needs to be, well, we have corrupted ward, we have, refreshing on most of this here. Except our chest piece, once again, we have sturdy energy and ward, and of course we have a gem slot here. So, I am rocking a Bane and Ward Shield, Accelerated Resolve, nice little perk to have. And we're throwing on our hatchet, not really super important, just hopefully it's got Bane, and we got the taunt of course. So, not gonna go crazy in depth with this, other than one thing here. We are slotting an infused beast ward potion here for when we go in on the doggos. So that's what this is for. It is for the first boss encounter, and it is for the dogs because the dogs do, well, they're beasts. So I guess I gotta take care of this little situation here. Is this dude trying to take me out, or is he just he must be just trying to de-aggro him. But anyways, so yeah, this can be pretty important. These beast ward potions are probably pretty expensive, But if you can, I'd go ahead and slot a Beast Ward potion, infused Beast Ward potion for the dog fight, because the dogs, they are beast, so they hurt a lot, and that's the main reason I'm switching over to heavy. If I had a light, you can get away with having a light corrupted ward set and survive. You got the extra dodges and you can kind of play the kite game, but they do hurt you a lot because they are beast and this is just corrupted ward. And the problem is, even if we slot a full beast ward set here, the problem is the main boss is still corrupted, so we're gonna take extra damage from the main boss. So that's a super annoying part of the fight. Well, the main boss is corrupted, but then once you switch over to the dog fight, it's a beast fight, so kind of tough to set yourself up perfectly with a light set. So I just go ahead and swap over to heavy for that part. And it does have constitution on it, and as a tank, our main job for that fight is just to stay alive. So it doesn't hurt that we do our swap and then we have constitution on our gears, so without having to adjust our stats, we get a lot more survivability just by having a lot more con, and plus we got our heavy gear on. So then as soon as we're done with that fight, we go ahead and we switch back to our light set and we finish it off. Even the very last boss, we are fighting with just the light tank set, and especially since it's a void mutation, well, the last boss is a void damage fight. Even if it's something different than a void mutation, if you want to light tank it, you would be best off, let's just say it's a fire mutation, you'd still be best off if you could slot a full void set. You would want to have a third set that you are bringing a full swap for and have full void damage mitigation, just because the last boss does void damage, and if you're not set up for void damage mitigation, it's going to hurt you a decent amount as a light tank. So fortunately it works out perfect. It's a void mutation, so we have tons of survivability as a light tank at 100 con in the very last boss. So we're going to go ahead and pop our food here just so we're prepared for a later part of the video that we're going to discuss. But we'll go straight to that right now. Our attributes. What I am running, 100 con, 150 dex, and the rest strength. So kind of was torn, went back and forth. A few of the times I went, let's go ahead and respec this. Some of the times I went up to 300 strength and only 100 dexterity. So let's talk a little bit about that. This stuff is very important. People don't realize how important it is to maximize your attributes. So very often I'm having people apply to my groups, and it happened many times during the runs that I was doing for this dungeon, and they'll apply with the spear and they'll have like 400 dex and then only like way less strength, and you let them know that, hey, you're losing out on damage. Go 310 strength, go 200 dex, and you're going to maximize your spear damage. And one, I let them know that because it's going to help them in the long run, but two, it's obviously going to help me out and my team out, because if our DPS is doing more damage, well, it's going to give us more survivability because stuff is going to die faster. So it's really important that you understand this concept right here. Let's hit respec. So take a look at these numbers. As you add stuff, it lets you know what this damage number is going to go to. So we're going 100 con. 100 con, increase max health by 10% of your physical armor. So it's definitely nice to get that little bit of extra HP pool by getting to 100. So I went to 150 in Laz, even though Lazarus, I'd prefer to go less in Lazarus, but so definitely could survive with 100 in Lazarus as well. I would consider Lazarus to be an easier light tanking dungeon than this one, but anyways, 100 con, that's what we went with. But then from there, let's take a look at these numbers. The main one we're looking at is our sword because, our hammer, it's just not really a damage doer. So, the problem is right here, I have so much dexterity here that it's actually I couldn't maximize the way I wanted. Even if I wanted to, I can't get to 300 strength. 300 strength gives us plus 10% base damage to heavy attacks. So that's not that crazy important, other than it's nice in the sense that, well, we do heavy attacks with our sword occasionally, and our heavy attacks do thrust damage, and Corrupted is weak to thrust damage, so it is nice that when we do a heavy attack, which is already thrust damage, which they're weak to, then we get that additional 10% bonus damage. But anyways, pay attention to this number, 13, 13. So let's drop to 250 and go the rest into dex. And, well, it's actually still 13, 13, so we're good to go. We're not losing any damage here. So that's one important thing you need to know is if you adjust these numbers here, figure out what is going to make you do the most damage here, but also pay attention to these nodes, which node is going to be super important for you to hit. And, well, so if we go 250 versus, close to 300 strength and the rest dexterity, we're not losing damage really. So that's kind of one important thing to know. But then the other important thing to know, well, this is a very important node to hit whenever we can. Stamina regen is 25% faster during the startup of basic attacks with a melee weapon. So that's really important because as a light tank, we are going to be fighting stamina issues throughout the dungeon, and that is one of the reasons I have switched up my build for this run. So this is an important stat to pick up anytime you can, that 250 benchmark for strength. But the other really nice one to hit, 150 dexterity. Dodges cost 10 less stamina. So as a light tank, we are going to be making tons of use out of our dodges. And, well, we are also going to be running into stamina issues since we are indeed a light tank. So anytime we can have savings on our stamina, it's massive. So very nice points to hit. 250 strength, 150 dex, 100 con. They all give us some very, very nice bonuses. So try to maximize your stats here, but also pay attention to these nodes. Very important to understand. So that covers the stats, the attributes that we are using for this run. Let's go ahead and jump into the weapon masteries. So hammer, we'll talk about this, even though it's probably the same as my Lazarus one, but the left side, in order to get here, we have to take something here, so this one I find to be the better of the two. Increase armor penetration by 10% for all your basic attacks. Not super important, but gaining power on heavy attacks, increasing damage by 20% for 4 seconds. Yeah, I mean that could be helpful, but we're not trying to do heavy attacks with this build. So adds grit to Warhammer heavy attacks, which we're not trying to use heavy attacks. We just have to take one or the other of these. All Warhammer abilities apply exhaust, slowing target stamina regeneration by 20% for 5 seconds. This wouldn't be a horrible one to take, but just between the two, I mainly take this one because, well, also grants 12% damage reduction while grit is active. Why is that handy? All 3 of our abilities have grit, so we are going to have damage mitigation every time we use one of these abilities, which is really important because, well, when we are using these abilities, we're using them to keep ourselves out of trouble. So damage mitigation while we are performing these attacks is very, very helpful. So Wrecking Ball, we're going to take it all the way to the bottom. It just knocks down the enemies, come all the way to the bottom, and it extends the range of targets that we can hit with this ability. So pretty basic on the left side. That's what we're taking. This side, well, we're taking Shockwave. this is our main taunt on the hammer. Well, it's our only taunt on the hammer, to be honest with you. But a couple of really important things here. It's going to stagger and stun the enemies. It's going to taunt everything that it hits. But this is one of the really important parts about it. Keep in mind, the trauma of this attack causes weaken, decreasing the damage dealt from the target's attacks by 10% for 10 seconds. So it's really important that you understand each of your abilities and what they do. Because, well, aside from just the taunt, this is also going to add weaken. So when we can, we want to save this for a taunt and space out our taunts. But we're not always going to just wait until an old taunt wears off before we use this, because sometimes we find it really important to add weaken. So we're going to go ahead and use this ability, and we're going to apply weaken to the mob. So sometimes we are going to hit a mob that's already taunted with this. One, because it's going to add weaken, but two, because we have Sundering Shockwave, which inflicts rend. So anytime we go ahead and use our Shockwave, we are going to apply weaken to the mobs. They're going to do less damage to both us and our teammates, but we're also going to apply rend to them, so both us and our teammates are going to be able to do more damage to the mob. So very important that you understand the purpose, the full scale purpose of each skill. It's not only about the stun, it's not only about the taunt, it's also about the weaken and the rend that we are adding to it. So very important to understand it. Also, this clear out, very important to understand everything that clear out does for you and your team. First and foremost, a wide swing that knocks back targets 4 meters and deals 100% weapon damage. This ability has grit, so important to understand the grit. Damage mitigation while you're using the skill. Hitting a target with clear out grants fortify, increasing armor by 20% for 4 seconds to all friendlies within 6 meters. So keep this in mind as well. Very important to understand the perks of all of your skills. Can't stress that enough. Because why is that important? Well, when we use this on a boss, well, sure, we're not going to knock that boss down, but we are going to apply fortify to all of our friendly teammates that are within 6 meters of us. And 6 meters is a pretty wide range. So you could be tempted to think, well, we're not going to be able to knock the boss, so we're not even going to bother using clear out on the boss. But use it, because you're going to grant fortify to yourself and your teammates, and you're going to give yourself and your teammates more survivability by using this ability on a boss, even though you can't knock the boss down. So like I said, it's very important to understand like the full scope of things when you're using ability and everything it does for you and your teammates. So clear out's cooldown is reduced by 5% per enemy hit with this ability, so that's obviously extremely important. We are absolutely taking this, just no questions asked. Using clear out on a target grants haste, increasing movement speed by 30% for 3 seconds. So I find this to be very important. As a light tank, we need to get in and out of trouble as fast as we can, so very, very good. So speaking of which, I do not have this selected right now. Honestly, I probably should have this selected, and I'll probably change it out. And there's one that I can there's one of these perks over here that I can get rid of and take this one instead. But what does this one do? After hitting a target with an active debuff, gain haste, increasing movement speed by 15% for 3 seconds. Pretty sure I'm gonna go ahead and change my build and take this one. What am I gonna get rid of? Probably this one right here. Deal 15% increased damage against targets affected by Warhammer debuffs. Like I mentioned, we're not trying to do damage with our hammer. If we're fighting against ancients, we can do a little bit of extra damage with our hammer, but even yet, we're not trying to focus damage with our hammer. And plus, this isn't an ancients dungeon, so realistically, I would say get rid of this one here, put it here. Get rid of this one here, put it here. My suggestion, and that's probably what I'm going to do myself. But let's talk about the rest of these here. So we talked about all of our abilities. Let's talk about the passives. Increase armor by 20% if surrounded by 2 or more enemies within 3 meters. Very important. This is going to apply like practically all the time. Increased armor of 20%, 2 or more enemies. Yeah, we're pretty much the tank trying to bring all the enemies towards us. So pretty much anytime we're fighting anything besides a boss, we're going to have this additional 20% armor. Very important to understand. When you have your hammer out, bunch of mobs around you, you're going to have increased armor. So, reduce stamina consumption by 30% when blocking melee attacks. So I find this one to be pretty important because, well, consider this one. When we have our hammer out, 20% increased armor. So if we got our hammer out and we got a cooldown on our ability, we can't knock the enemies down, or perhaps we want to space out our knockdowns just a little bit, we stun them with our shockwave, and then we go ahead and block for just a little while. Then we stun them with our clear out, we go ahead and block for just a little while. Or else we do a couple of light attacks, but having this reduced stamina consumption, it's really, really handy. But let's continue talking about the rest. Reduce damage taken by 10% while sprinting. Very nice. So when we're sprinting through mobs and we got our hammer out so we can knock them down whenever we need to, well, additional 10% damage reduction. Very nice. This one, very important. Reduce Warhammer cooldowns by 7% when using light attacks against targets with an active debuff, which is basically all the time. There should basically never be a mob that doesn't have a debuff on it if we are attacking it. You're always opening up with debuffs. So, and this is the one I talked about that we probably should get rid of and select this one. But what does this one do? Deal 15% increased damage against targets affected by Warhammer debuffs. So sure, that 15% extra damage is nice, but the hammer doesn't do much damage anyways as it is. So realistically, we're better to take the utility option, get that haste. But this is the one we had for the run, so we'll show you that. And then, kind of pretty darn important too, heal 35% of damage dealt when using a Crowd Crusher ability. So these abilities, they don't do any crazy amounts of damage, but oftentimes we're going to hit tons of mobs at once. So 35% of a small amount of damage to 5 different mobs, well, it can top us off quite nicely, especially if we're sitting inside of a sacred and our heals are getting buffed. Well, we can go from just a couple of HP to maxed out pretty fast if we hit like 6, 7, 8 mobs with a shockwave or with a clear out or with a wrecking ball. Well, actually, wrecking ball, sorry, my bad. Wrecking Ball does not, this perk does not apply to Wrecking Ball. Important to, keep note of that. Obviously, Wrecking Ball, it's going to work with our Leeching Ring, but it's not going to get this additional 35% heal. So, just important to understand that. And then the last thing here, whenever a target is affected by a crowd control effect, they are slowed by 20% for 4 seconds. I find this to be like kind of a near must. As a tank, our job, we're here to apply utility. We want to knock down the mobs. Anytime we can add slow to them, it's going to be that much harder for the mobs to track us down or our teammates down to do damage to them. Sometimes slow added to mobs, it's kind of an underrated utility. But I'm not underrating it. I'm telling you that it is pretty darn important. So that's my build. The only thing I would suggest, get rid of this one, put it here. But it's, not end of the world as you'll see in the video. We made this build work, but I would suggest for the little extra utility, instead of the additional 15% damage, which is going to be so minimal, just take this, get that extra haste. After you hit a target with an active debuff, which is going to be, all the time-ish. So, that covers our hammer. Let's go to the sword and shield. So, this is a little bit of an interesting build here. we are using 3 abilities, but we have 4 selected on our tree. So I talked a little bit about this in our last guide, but we're going to show you how it applies in this guide. So we absolutely want leadership. A lot of people, when they are light tanking, they're going to take hammer and hatchet, or they're going to take hammer and spear, something different than hammer and sword. But I just find it, I've mentioned this in my other videos, I find it so hard to justify not giving your teammates the additional 10% damage from the leadership perk. So to me, running light tank and then not taking leadership, it's, not taking sword and shield. Yeah, you can do it, but I think you're just missing out on a lot of potential damage here. So in order to get leadership, we have to take 10 perks on this side. So as you can see here, we have every single perk selected, but it's still not enough to get us this leadership, because you have to have 10 up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Well, we have nowhere else we can put the 10th one except into an ability. So we go ahead and we throw it into Whirling Blade. So one bonus about this, if you wanted to switch, you get to a boss and you say, okay, we can get rid of this ability for this boss, so we're going to go ahead and throw Whirling Blade on it. That'd be a pretty viable option to do. I didn't do that at all in this run, but it could be handy. You already have the build made. You don't have to remake the build. You could just switch. Actually, no, it doesn't work because we don't have, sorry. So it wouldn't even be worth it, because this is only worth it once you add Whirling Blade inflicts 15% rend for 10 seconds. So forget about that. It's, not gonna do us any good. Forget about that little comment. But anyways, 10 here, and then we get leadership. Very, very important end game tanking. And well, let's go over here. So let's talk about the passes. This one, a guaranteed, grants an additional 15% physical armor. This one, pretty much a guaranteed, reduced damage from all magical types by 10%. Elemental resistance, obviously mutations, we're going to be taking magical damage, ranged magical damages, whatever. So, reduced damage from all magical types by 10%. 100%, you're taking this. And on the right side, there's a couple different options you could take, but stamina damage is reduced by 15% when blocking a melee attack with shield. I would love to take this one, especially for this dungeon and for this situation. Like, if there was a way that I could magically take this one and put it here, oh, would I love it. But we can't, because we need this leadership. So, would love to take this one, but we just don't have enough points. So, one we're taking here, when you block an attack, gain 20% fortify for 5 seconds. We're constantly blocking attacks, so I find this one to pretty much be a go-to. So you're going to gain fortify. It's going to give you a little extra survivability every time you block an attack. Coming down here, stamina damage reduced by 50% when blocking ranged attacks with the shield. Just not one that really is that beneficial. If you had unlimited points, sure, you'd love to have it, but yeah. This one, it comes in super, super handy for this build. Do not take this one with some of my other builds, like in Lazarus, didn't take this one, but I mentioned how handy it could be if you're dealing with stamina issues, and well, occasionally we're dealing with stamina issues in this dungeon. So we're grabbing this one, and gain 15 stamina when you hit a target with Shield Bash or Shield Rush. So now with this build, we are taking both Shield Bash and Shield Rush. So when we get low on stamina, we can hit them with Shield Rush. We get low on stamina, we can hit them with Shield Bash. And major part of this build. So stamina definitely can become an issue in this dungeon. So very strong perk to take. A couple of the other ones that would be very nice to have, but we just can't because we don't have points. Final blow, third attack in your light attack chain deals more damage and causes more threat. Would be nice, but it's really not that necessary. The other one that would be awesome, all incoming healing and regeneration is increased by 10%. Would absolutely love to have this one, but there's just no points that we can afford to give up in order to get this one. So that covers the passives, but let's talk about the abilities. So Shield Bash deals 50% weapon damage, so not very good at doing damage, but it staggers and stuns the foes in front of you for 2 seconds. So that's massive. All of a sudden, we have an additional stun. A 2-second stun. And you can actually hit a ton of mobs. You have mobs kind of spaced out all around you. Hit them with your Shield Bash, and you can stun a big, huge group of mobs. It's such a good skill. You know, I'm tempted to run this skill all the time. I absolutely love it, and I've talked about this in some of my other builds, how much I absolutely love Shield Bash, but the only problem is this rend is so massive. It's so nice. I love Whirling Blade too, so I love both of these skills, so it's so hard to pick between each of them. But if I have enough survivability, I'm going to go ahead with Whirling Blade. But for this particular dungeon, I am going with Shield Bash because, well, you'll see just how good it is in our walkthrough. It would be awesome if we could come down. Shield Bash causes more threat and deals more damage, but coming down here would be unreal. The stun duration is increased by 1 second, but the thing is, once we stun them, oftentimes they're gonna get knocked down and bashed around. And having the extra 1 second, it's not necessarily going to perk that, crazy often. So it'd be nice to come all the way down here, but we can't afford it. 1 and 2, oftentimes the enemies are going to be getting pulled out of that stun by future attacks sooner than this an additional 1 second would come into play. So Shield Rush. Rush forward 5 meters, staggering and pushing back foes. This attack deals 100% weapon damage. Ability has grit. So the stagger is nice. Pushing back the foe is nice. But this one, it's all about adding this weaken here. So this is pretty massive. 20% weaken for 10 seconds. All enemies within 5 meters. So that's a pretty good wide radius. So adding this 20% weaken, it really is important. Old days, I never took this one because weaken wasn't as important when you used to be able to stack up tons of Fortify for survivability, but Fortify isn't as strong as it used to be, so, I'm still tempted to go with, I'm probably going to even play with it some, but super tempted to go with Shield Bash and Whirling Blade instead of Shield Rush, but it is so hard to drop this weekend. But probably going to play around with this, in future runs. Try dropping Shield Rush and see how I like it. It could be very viable. If your team is dying and you're not using this, well, chances are that you need to use it. But if you try it and your team is still surviving, you're getting enough weaken from other sources, well, then it could be viable to, go with the rend instead of the weaken. But weaken tends to be king in mutations these days, so this is the one we're going with. But beyond that, we have this passive that when we use the Shield Rush, we're going to get extra stamina, and stamina is definitely, a thing of importance for this run. So now obviously the very last one we're taking here, Defender's Resolve. Kind of a no-brainer. For 8 seconds, reduce the incoming base damage from attackers for 30% and reduce attackers' stamina damage while blocking by 20%. All of that, super, super good. Ability has grit, so you're, not going to hardly get interrupted while you're using it. But the other thing, obviously, it's a big, massive taunt. You're going to inflict an 8-second taunt to everything within 8 meters of you. So, you know, kind of, the main thing is the taunt, but also the damage reduction, stamina damage reduction, all gonna be very, very important. So, would love to come down here if we could. If your health is above 50%, damage reduction is increased by 20%, then you get a nice 15% heal once Defender's Resolve ends. Would love these perks, but we just can't afford them. So, that is our build. And of course, you can see here, Shield Rush, Shield Bash, Defender's Resolve. We have Whirling Blade selected just so we can get leadership, but we are not putting it into our build. So, that's how we get away with leadership while running the 3 abilities on the right side of the tree. So, this build comes in incredibly handy in this dungeon, so you know, give it a try someday. See how you like it. And let me know how it goes for you. But the other thing I guess we did not mention yet, we're taking this Cunning Heart Rune of Grasping Vines. It's awesome. Enfeebling Vines, it inflicts weaken, massive weaken, 20% weaken for 8 seconds. But the other thing is it roots the enemies in place. We're going to be using this one defensively quite often in this run. It's very nice to use it offensively. I've talked about this before, but what I mean by offensively is, you know, there's a bunch of mobs here. We come in, we block, you know, first we come in, maybe we stun them, we taunt them, we get on the opposite side of them as our teammates so they can come in and get the free back hits. But then one of our teammates drops a big, massive gravity well that groups up the mobs. And then as that gravity well wears off, we root them in place so they stay stacked up. And, well, it's massive because it keeps them grouped up so they can get killed in that nice tight group very easily. So that's what I mean about using it offensively. But oftentimes we are going to be using it defensively. You know, we come into a fight, we're knocking enemies around, things get messy, and well, there's mobs scattered all over. Our health starts getting low, we're out of stamina, maybe we're all out of skills. We can't stun them anymore, but we have our leeching, or we have our heart rune up, and we got our vines. So mobs are coming after us, we're low on health, we're low on stamina, out of abilities. So we go ahead and we apply our leeching vines, and well, we root them in place, and we get a little bit of leeching, a little bit of health out of it, but also it roots them all in place so they can't get closer to attack us and finish us off when we are low. So definitely my go-to as a tank. But I guess that covers all of that information. So let's go ahead and jump into the walkthrough. So hopefully the video quality isn't too bad on this one. I did forget to hit record before I did this run, so I ended up pulling it off my Twitch channel, which is handy. Glad that I was streaming it on Twitch because, well, I was able to go back and download the clip. So quality should be acceptable, but it'll probably be slightly lower quality than if I just had recorded it. But nonetheless, let's talk a little bit about team building. Didn't really talk about that yet. So, didn't get like the perfect, absolute best combination of weapons that I would have loved to, but nonetheless, it was a pretty good combination. We had 2 Great Axe spears, and we had a spear greatsword. For some reason, incredibly hard to find anyone that wanted to run greatsword hammer in here, but such a strong build when you can add armor breaker, add 30% rend, have Sundering Shockwave, add an additional rend there, an additional weaken for mobs. Obviously, we're running Sundering Shockwave ourselves, so those perks aren't going to stack. But there's times when they can hit mobs that we're not hitting and apply that weaken and rend. But plus, they can add a 30% massive rend with armor breaker. But anyways, we're getting going right here. So we just get started off, go ahead and tap the first couple of mobs, go in, taunt the next couple with our shockwave. So you're going to see we make lots and lots of use of our dodges. We're pretty darn squishy. We can't afford to sit there and take too many hits. So we're kind of constantly cycling between dodges and knockdowns, switching over to our sword and shield when we can. But you're going to see that we're going to have the hammer out quite a bit because it's all about first things first, survivability. We got our hammer out. We're applying our knockdowns, if we're making use of our refreshing move, getting our cooldowns back, very handy. So this first pull can be super sketchy, but watch what we do here. We just hit them right away with one of our knockdowns and we dodge away. Get behind them and taunt them and stun them with our big stun. But also another thing you're going to notice, we went ahead and we popped our tier 5 ward potion before we entered here. So one place where our gold bag should come in very handy. Our ward potion should last a little bit longer. So very, very good reason to invest in those gold bags if you can. So very easy to screw this pull up. These little crawlers, man, they can wreck you pretty fast if you let them. So you got to keep dodging them. You got to keep hitting them with your knockdowns. And, well, you can see I whiffed on a couple of my abilities there. Eventually, one of the mobs did take out one of our teammates, but it's just a knock, not a full finish yet. So we're good to go. You can see, we managed to clear that out pretty nice and fast. If you're trying to be advanced tank, you're trying to, well, you can see there's one mob left fighting in the back there. Had to apologize for my teammate for leaving him to fight that guy alone, but we got to keep things moving. So that one dog, he can cause some problems. Go ahead and grab his aggro right away. Go and stack on this musket. Anytime you can, try to pull everything to the musket. You're going to see these silence zones, they definitely cause problems. And, all of these mobs, we're a light tank at 100 con. We can't afford to sit and eat much damage. So we're using our stuns, we're dodging in, we're dodging out. So dodges are a massive part of making this work. You can't sit there and eat a whole lot of damage. So I was a little bit confused here. This isn't usually how I do this pull. That one musket was already aggroed. Usually he isn't. Usually I'm going to go and tap, this group of mobs, and then I'm going to go stack on that musket. But a little bit confused, and well, okay, not a big deal. This musket's already nice and close, so we're just going to stack on him. But then I realized, okay, there's this one extra mob over here. He's by the barrels. We need to open up the ability for our team to activate the barrels as soon as we can. So we got to go grab the aggro of this extra mob. Not worth fighting him alone later on. So try to stack as many mobs on top of each other as you can. And, well, we are moving right along. So things are getting low, and we're going to go ahead and keep things moving. We're going to grab that barrel since nobody else did, but that's perfectly fine. Our DPS can do more true damage to the mob, so if I can go ahead and do the utility part of it, put those barrels going, well, the rest of our team is finishing off the mobs, no problems there. So this part here, usually I'll come and light these barrels and mine that one resource, but then we're going right in. We can't be delaying if we are trying to, do good on points. We've got to try and keep things moving right along. And that's obviously the whole point of trying to be a light tank, trying to be a more advanced tank. You are trying to go for higher point zones, or maybe you're trying to do speed runs. So regardless, either way, you got to keep things moving along. So we dodge right in on these mobs. We go ahead and drop our shockwave, which is going to apply a taunt, weaken, and also a rend to all of the mobs. And, well, we make sure that we touch the shrine just to make sure we set our next reset point. In case we did happen to full die, that's where we would respawn. But anytime we get knocked and we're close to a shrine, just make sure we go ahead and touch that shrine. So right here, we're just going to go right in on the boss. Mainly, we're going to try and hold the big guys aggro. You can see our DPS, they go ahead and grab the other two mini bosses together. They're going to group those two bosses together and kind of AoE them down while we hold the big guys aggro. So for the most part, your healer needs to focus on your DPS. You know, good to keep the sacred on the DPS. For the most part, the healer's job is to keep the sacred on the tank at almost all times, but there are times when that does not apply, like right here. More important that he keeps the main focus on the DPS so they can keep mowing those mobs down and, well, apply his secondary heals to you. And basically, you know, kite this guy as much as you need to, dodge him as much as you need to, apply your weakens to him, and your job is just to survive. Potentially, you can mob all three of these guys down at once. You know, that's probably going to be the absolute fastest way if you can do it, but sometimes, you know, when this guy is stunning you and knocking people around, and sometimes it can lead to a dangerous situation. So the safest way while still being acceptably fast is, you know, have your teammates just take out the two squishies right away, group them together, mow them down, and then solo focus on this boss. So whenever we can, we're applying our weekends to this guy. We're applying our rends, you know. We're going to go ahead and we're going to use clear out because that's going to apply fortify to ourselves and our teams. So that's, you know, how I mentioned before, it's important to understand that clear out, even though it's not going to knock a boss down, it's still going to apply fortify to you and your teammates. It's not going to do a massive amount of damage, so it can be tempting to think, well, I'm not going to use clear out on this guy. But once you understand that it does apply fortify to your whole team that's within distance, well, then you know that it's worth to still use it. So this first barrel, we go ahead and we skip to the barrel, we light it on fire. What does that do? Well, one, it gives us extra mob kills because once they destroy the barrel, all the mobs that die, well, it's going to give us extra mob kills. But the main thing is it stacks everything up. So we get ourselves in trouble. The main thing that caused us to get knocked here is the silence. We weren't able to use our abilities to bail us out, so we get ourselves into a sketchy situation. So we have one problem here. We got ourselves a knock, and the shrine, it is pretty close, but being the tank, it is going to slow us down if we take pause and go run to the shrine. You can see we're getting low. We get into a very sketchy situation here. But we do manage to handle it. So, perfect example in this specific mutation, really good to pay attention to the silent zones. If we weren't slacking, we would have realized that, oh, the silence is about to go off, and we would have set the silence off before it put us into a sketchy situation. But we barely managed to handle it and snuck out without getting any full deaths out of the situation. Very close, you know, I got one knock and then I got very low on health after it, so almost a sketchy situation, but we pulled off. So this part, we're going to count 3 waves after we start the barrel. So on the 3rd wave, we're just going to get all of the aggro of the mobs and we are going to run away from the barrel. But basically the idea here is we focus on sticking in the middle of this kind of 4-way corridor. We're going to go ahead and we're going to stun all the mobs as they come through. We're going to go ahead and grab their aggro and we're going to try to drag them into the middle. You can see where that silence zone is. Super sketchy because, well, it's a very tight corridor, and if you can't use your abilities, you can't knock down the mobs. So if you get trapped inside of there and you can't clear out the mobs, chances are you're gonna get knocked, you're gonna be trapped, and the explosion goes off from the silent zone and you die. So not a good thing. Try to keep the traffic away from that pinch point. go ahead, grab the aggro of everything as you need and pull it to the middle. So this is the third wave, so we're ready to run. Typically I'm going to run the opposite way, but I did have a knock, so I wanted to make sure I go and touch the shrine to be safe once we have a shrine that's close. So just kind of communicating with my teammates through voice, saying, hey, third wave, correct, let's dip, let's go, move on to the next. And I go touch the shrine. We have our DPS that's nice and smart, throw their gravity well to slow any mobs down from chasing us down. Trying to make sure that our teammates can mine the things without any of the mobs taking them out. So just making sure we stun any mobs that might try and take out our teammates. And we're moving along. As soon as the barrels blow up from the last place, all the mobs are going to disappear, so we don't got to worry about killing those actual mobs. But anyways, we're going to go ahead and try to stack everything on this musket. There is one way that you definitely can do this without coming stack on this musket. Your healer can shoot the musket from far away, and they can pull the musket over to the middle. But it works pretty good to just come and stack down on him immediately right away. So we get to these barrels, we're going to kill all the mobs that are here active, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to blow the barrels once here, and that's going to help us get the mob count that we need. So kind of a little bit of a silly mechanic, but once you know it, it works pretty decently. So what we do, go ahead and we light these barrels once. Got a couple of mobs aggroed, but we don't really have to worry about them. We're trying to move along, so we can just go ahead and jump up on, we don't gotta fight them. We're gonna light the barrel. We're gonna let the mobs destroy the barrel once. We're gonna light the barrel again, and we're ready to go to town. We can finish off these last couple of mobs, but they'll AoE down with everything else, so we don't gotta worry about taking them out individually. Really important concept of trying to do more advanced runs. You need to keep things moving. So you're gonna see just how much we're making use of our dodges, but you're also gonna see just how annoying these silent zones are sometimes. Once we're in a silent zone, we can't use our stuns, and being a light DPS, we can't really afford to just sit there and block mobs for a long time. So really important that you have DPS that, they have enough survivability that they can dodge things as need. If you're not, you can't drop a stun on them, you can't drop a taunt on them because you're in a silent zone. Well, you can't afford to just get yourself killed either, so you gotta dodge out of the silent zone, and any DPS that are, on the opposite side of the silent zone, they gotta figure out how to dodge themselves. So, very fortunate to have a very strong team for this run, and it was a random pug group, so one little piece of bonus information. You don't just randomly wake up one day and you're able to do these kind of runs. You're not going to just watch one video and you're going to get all of a sudden, you're going to be a perfect light tank. You're just going to mow through everything. Your team is magically just going to mow through everything. So, well, a lot of times you'll go and try to do these runs and, well, things go a little bit haywire. And team starts complaining and crying, and well, they just expect it to go perfect the very first run. But when I make these groups, well, for example, when I made this group, I said light tank 100 con, join at your own risk. So it's basically a warning. Don't be a whiner. Join if you like, but I'm still going to, I'm still going to make you link your gear and all that good stuff. Still going to make sure that you have proper gear. I'm going to make sure that you're got a proper amount of con. But yeah, anyways, right here we do switch to our heavy tank gear. Just gonna be safe because, well, this boss right here, Isabella, she is corrupted. But once the big doggos spawn in, they are beasts. So It's impossible to perfectly optimize for this fight. Even if we go light and we have Beast Ward, well then Isabella's gonna hurt us more. You know, we go light and we go corrupted, well the beasts are gonna hurt us more. It is possible to kind of kite tank the dogs, so to speak, but in my opinion, you're just as well off. Just put on some heavy gear just for this fight and call it a day. Definitely doable as a light tank, but it can be a bit of a pain. So I just figured let's just go heavy. It's just the safe option. We're gonna let our DPS do the DPS in here, and yeah. So finish off Isabella. Now the doggos are gonna spawn, and things that actually get a bit hairy here. So sometimes these dogs can be kind of crazy. You'll taunt them, you'll have aggro, and they'll still go running around a little bit. But anyways, obviously we got the other dog. Okay, let's just start off. I go ahead and taunt him, and I throw my weaken on him. All of a sudden, well, this is the first problem we run into. The dog, well, he's trapped inside the cage, and that's not ideal. Because the dog should basically be dead by now, but we just wasted a lot of time. And, well, the longer it takes to kill him, the more chances there are for problems to arise. And, well, we do run into some problems. So, ooh, we got 2 dogs out. That's a little bit sketchy. No, well, healer's down. There's this little trick where the healer can trap the other dog inside the cage, but sometimes he does still escape. But this comes in handy, where I mentioned make sure you go ahead and slot a Beast Ward potion into your slot for this fight. And I did, and it came in extremely handy. And this dog, well, he wanted to go after our teammates there. I had to get his aggro back, but he's being crazy. He keeps turning. So I guess I made a mistake. I had him taunted, but I didn't do enough damage to him to keep holding his aggro. But, well, we were very fortunate to have that Beast Ward potion that could have potentially saved our lives. And you can see he almost took us out here. But we do manage to make it through. Got super hectic, super sketchy, but we're all good. We made it work, so things can be a little goofy. You can see how that dog kind of got super, I don't know, he got trapped inside of his cage, and that doesn't usually happen with that dog. It's usually the other dog that kind of does silly stuff. Usually this dog, the dog we were originally tanking, usually he just comes right out, but he did his little dodge back, got trapped inside the cage. So right there, you can see just how squishy you can be as a light tank. That spear, well, he did some pretty heavy damage to me and took me out. That's my fault. I shouldn't have let that happen, but whatever, life happens. We aren't perfect, but we try and take advantage of that one knock that we do have. So right here, this boss, you can call him back. Lots of times I'm just going to go in and fight him because, well, sometimes you waste time waiting for him to pull. So usually you can just go fight him in the middle. Lots of times you are going to pull extra mobs, but, well, usually you can just mow them down. You can see we end up pulling extra mobs anyways, so we have to AoE extra mobs down with the boss. But as long as you got a strong group, it's usually not a problem. So typically just run right into the middle, take the boss out, AoE him down with the extra mobs. The other option that you can do, run right past the boss, pull him right up to the top steps, and, well, you can fight him with all of the other mobs at the top. But what we're going to do here is, I think the mob actually already pulled. Usually there's a mob back here, but I'll come and grab his aggro just so our DPS can come in there and mine for free. But then I'm just going to drag him right up top to these other mobs. Jump right into the middle. Go ahead and drop our nice shockwave. Nice little stun, nice little taunt, nice little weaken, nice little rend to start off the fight. And, just kind of cycling back and forth between our sword and shield, and then jumping back on our hammer when we need some knockdowns again. Got our nice stun, our nice taunt, and well, for the most part, we're just letting our DPS do their job. We're adding in a little bit of damage when we can, and well, we're moving right along. So one thing you need to keep track of at this point, your mob count. You get 20 mobs in at the last boss, so you need 120 total. So as long as you are at 100 or above, you're good. You could see we were at 108, so we know at this point, hey, we're golden. Let's get on with the job. We don't got to kill any more mobs. Let's go take out the boss. We're moving along nicely. Let's get this fight on the road. So this boss does void damage, and it's a void mutation, so we already have a full void set on. So that makes this fight super handy, super easy. We have incredible survivability against this boss, even as a light tank at 100 con. So that's one thing to keep in mind. If this happened to be a different mutation, nature mutation, fire mutation, it still wouldn't hurt to have a full swap and swap to a full void damage set, void damage mitigation set. It's going to help make this fight a whole lot easier. Sure, it is a pain to have multiple sets, but when it comes to endgame, if you want to maximize your potential, that's just what it takes sometimes, is having multiple sets of gear. Love it or hate it, well, this is endgame, so complain all you want, but it's just how you are going to maximize yourself. Have multiple sets of gear so you can afford to be as low as con as possible while still having as much survivability as possible. It's just what it takes sometimes. So this boss, super basic. Obviously we had those two waves of mobs. We're gonna try and save our AoE taunts for those mobs when they spawn in if we can. We're gonna try to maybe have a shockwave up for one of them and hopefully have our defender's resolve up for the other if possible. But other than that, this fight's pretty basic. You just sit on the boss and stay on one side until she spawns all of her pillars in, move her to the far side, and just AoE her down. It's actually crazy how much survivability you have when it's a void mutation and you're full setup for void mitigation damage. I had a run where the healer died very early in the fight, and I could survive on my own without any heals at 100 con light tank. No problem just surviving without any healer. So very, very nice to have a void mutation. So go ahead and take advantage of that and try to push yourself a little bit this week in Dynasty, because this is one of the more friendly mutations when Dynasty is a void mutation. So you can see there a nice 86k run. And, we were pretty high up on the leaderboard. I think when we finished this run, we were like 5th on the leaderboard. So pretty good for just a pug group. There are a couple of these teams that I had, or a couple of the people from this team that I had played with here and there before. And we did a few runs before this with a few of the guys as well. So, but at the end of the day, the only people that were above us on the leaderboard are people that run together every week for weeks on end. They've been running for months, maybe even years together. So to get viably within range of people that play every week, every day, every month together, constantly doing runs together, and to be right there within shot of, the same number of points they're getting, we can't complain. So pretty happy with this run, and I hope maybe you learned something new from it, and we'll catch you on the next one. I hope you have a good one.